You lie awake again, scrolling through images of people you'll never meet, wearing clothes designed to be seen once and discarded, speaking in borrowed phrases that dissolve before morning. The light from your screen casts no shadow. It simply fills the space around your face with a pale glow that belongs to no particular time of day, no season, no place. You could be anywhere. You could be nowhere. The distinction has stopped mattering. You've noticed something about the people around you, though you've never quite said it aloud. Everyone seems to be wearing a costume of themselves, the carefully curated outfit that signals belonging to a tribe too diffuse to name, the aesthetic that promises identity but delivers only recognition. You see someone wearing the same shoes as you and feel nothing, perhaps a slight embarrassment, a desire to explain that you bought them first or that you wear them differently, that yours means something other than what theirs mean. The shared object creates no connection. It only highlights the distance. There are festivals now, of course, massive gatherings where people fly across continents to stand in fields and deserts, wearing flower crowns or neon body paint, moving to music that promises transcendence. You've maybe been to one, or you've seen the photographs, the aerial shots of thousands of people spread across the landscape like a pixelated sea. And there's something beautiful in it, something that tugs at a place behind your ribs. But you've also noticed how carefully people document their presence there, how the experience seems designed to be captured, translated, broadcast, how even in the midst of the crowd, even while moving to the same beat, there's a kind of loneliness that no amount of bass can drown out. You belong to many things, in theory. You have memberships and subscriptions. You follow causes and identify with movements. You can recite the values of organizations you've never set foot in, align yourself with philosophies you learned from podcasts while doing dishes. But if someone asked you to point to the place where you belong, the physical ground where your presence is woven into the landscape, where your absence would tear a visible hole, you'd hesitate. You might name a city, but cities don't notice when you leave. You might name a community, but communities now are mostly networks, mostly virtual, mostly optional in a way that makes them something other than what the word once meant. The restlessness you feel isn't about missing a specific time or place. It's older than that and less precise. It's the feeling of being untethered, of moving through your life without leaving footprints that matter, without participating in something so much larger than yourself that you could disappear into it and feel, paradoxically, more real. You're looking for a rhythm that includes you without requiring you to perform yourself. A pattern you can step into that was there before you arrived and will continue after you leave. But that, for the duration of your presence, holds a space shaped exactly like you. There's a memory that isn't quite yours, more like a genetic echo, a story your bones remember even though your mind has never lived it. The memory of putting on a specific color and becoming, for a day or a week, indistinguishable from everyone around you in a way that didn't diminish you but amplified something essential. The memory of moving in unison, not because someone choreographed it, but because the choreography was older than anyone present, handed down like a recipe, adjusted by each generation, but fundamentally recognizable, fundamentally the same. You think about how much energy you spend trying to be unique, to differentiate yourself, to craft an identity that sets you apart. And you're good at it, probably. You've assembled a self that's distinct, that can be described in terms that don't quite apply to anyone else. But late at night, when the performance exhausts you, when the project of being yourself feels like work you didn't agree to, you wonder what it would be like to stop trying. Not to disappear, but to belong so completely to something that the question of your individual specialness becomes irrelevant. The way a single thread in a tapestry doesn't need to be unique to be essential. The festivals you see now, the gatherings and movements and moments of collective effervescence, they promise this. They offer the language of unity and connection. But something's missing, some ingredient that can't be synthesized or scheduled. You can rent a costume, follow the guidelines, show up at the appointed hour, do everything right, and still feel like a tourist in someone else's ritual, because the rituals you have access to were invented recently, or imported from contexts you don't inhabit, or designed by committees trying to manufacture the very thing that only emerges when no one's trying to manufacture it. What you're missing isn't the past. You're not foolish enough to think you'd thrive in a time without antibiotics or central heating, or the ability to leave a situation that's killing you. What you're missing is the feeling of moving through a year that had a shape, a rhythm that included everyone. Moments when the boundary between you and your neighbours dissolved, not because you chose it, but because the calendar demanded it, because the season required it, because everyone who came before you did it and everyone who came after you would do it. And for that brief window, you were part of a pattern so much larger than your individual concerns that those concerns could rest. You're missing the knowledge that once a year or once a season, there would come a day when you'd wake up and put on the same colour as everyone else in your town. Not metaphorically, not as a brand or an affiliation or a choice that signified your values, but actually, physically, the same cloth, the same dye, the same decision made in 1,000 households at once, because it was time. Because the calendar said so. Because that's what you did. And the colour would mark you, yes, but it would mark you as belonging, as being part of something that predated your birth and would outlive your death, as essential to the pattern while also being individually replaceable. Which sounds like it should hurt, that replaceability, but instead it's what you're craving. The permission to be small and necessary instead of unique and optional. The chance to move with everyone else and feel, in that movement, less alone than you've ever felt when trying to stand out. This is where the restlessness lives. In the gap between the self you've constructed and the self that wants to dissolve into something older. Between the identity you maintain and the belonging you crave. Between the performance of individuality and the relief of occasionally, ritually, setting that performance down and picking up something that was never yours alone, that you share with people whose names you might not know, but whose presence, in that moment, matters more than names ever could. The screen is still glowing. You're still scrolling. But somewhere underneath the feed, underneath the curated moments and the performed lives, there's a question forming. What would it feel like to wear the same color as your whole town, not because you chose it, but because the day demanded it? What would it feel like to move together? To dance or march or simply walk through streets you know by heart, surrounded by people who, for that one day, weren't strangers or neighbors or friends, but something more fundamental? What would it feel like to participate in something that didn't require you to be interesting or special or unique, but only to be present, to show up, to add your body to the larger body of the community moving through a ritual as old as anyone could remember? You don't know. You've never known. But the not knowing aches in a way that suggests you once did, or that someone who gave you their bones and their blood once did, and the memory is still there, waiting, like a song you've forgotten the words to but can still hum. The past wasn't easier. You know this. You know that the festivals you're beginning to imagine weren't vacations from hardship, but respites within it. Brief moments of collective joy or collective mourning woven into lives that were shorter and harder and more brutal than anything you've experienced. You know that the people who dyed their clothes the same color did so with hands that were rough from work you couldn't do. That they gathered in town squares after days that would break you. That their unity was born not from choice, but from necessity, from the simple fact that survival required cooperation in ways your life no longer does. But knowing this doesn't stop the longing. It just complicates it, makes it more interesting. Because what you're longing for isn't the ease of their lives, but the coherence. The sense that their suffering meant something because it was shared, because it was part of a pattern. Because the same forces that made their lives hard also gave them a calendar full of moments when that hardship paused, when the ordinary hierarchy dissolved, when everyone wore the same color and moved to the same rhythm and the person you envied and the person you pitied were, for a few hours, just other threads in the same cloth. Let yourself sink into this. Let the restlessness dissolve into curiosity. You're not going back. You're not even sure you'd want to, if given the choice. But you can look back, can trace the threads, can ask what it was like to live in a world where, once a year, the whole town wore blue or red or undyed linen white, and in that wearing became something more than a collection of individuals, became a body, became a moment, became a memory that would echo forward through centuries until it reached you here, lying in the dark, wondering what it is you've lost and whether it was ever really yours to begin with. The air is changing around you. Your breathing is slowing. The question is settling from your mind into your chest. Where questions go when they stop demanding answers and start offering something else. Comfort maybe. Or permission. Permission to remember something you never experienced. Permission to long for something you never had. Permission to feel the ache of displacement, not as a personal failing, but as a rational response to a world that offers you everything, except a place, a time, a ritual, a color, a moment when you could stop being yourself and start being part of something that was never about you at all. Close your eyes if you haven't already. Feel the weight of your body on whatever surface holds you. You're going to travel now, not forward, but backward, not to escape, but to understand. You're going to visit a place that doesn't exist anymore, that maybe never existed exactly the way you'll imagine it. But that's real enough in the memories your body carries, in the longing that surfaces when the performance of modern life becomes too heavy to maintain. You're going to a town you've never seen, in a time you've never lived, to watch people put on the same color and become, for a little while, the same thread in a tapestry they didn't weave but knew how to repair. And in watching them, in letting their rhythm become your rhythm, maybe you'll find what you've been looking for. Not an answer, not a solution, but a kind of rest, a kind of recognition, a kind of coming home to a place that was never yours, but that holds you anyway, the way all true homes do. Breathe. Let the present fade. Let the past rise. Let yourself remember what you never knew. The town exists in a valley you could walk across in an hour if you hurried, though no one hurries. The walking itself is the point, especially today, especially now, when the sun hasn't yet cleared the eastern ridge and the air still holds the cool weight of the night just past. You wake before the light, as does everyone, not because an alarm sounds, but because your body knows. The day knows. The season has been building toward this moment for weeks, and now that it's here, sleep releases you without argument. You reach for the clothes you prepared last night. The color is red, deep red, the color of clay after rain. The color of certain berries crushed and boiled and mixed with substances you don't fully understand, but trust because your mother trusted them, because her mother taught her, because the knowledge is older than anyone's memory, and still works, still transforms raw wool and linen into something that announces, when you put it on, that you belong to this day, this town, this particular turning of the year. Everyone is wearing red. You step outside and see your neighbor emerging from her door at the same moment, and the sight of her in the same shade you're wearing doesn't diminish either of you. Instead, it's as if the color gains strength from being repeated, as if each person wearing it adds to its potency, its meaning, its ability to mark this day as different from all the days before and all the days that will come after. The children are already gathering in the lane, their red clothes too big or too small, adjusted from older siblings or saved for younger ones. The cloth itself holding memories of other festivals, other years, other bodies that wore the same red on the same day in different springs. They're not yet self-conscious about the uniform. They delight in it, pointing at each other and laughing. A game of recognition that doesn't get old because it only happens once a year. Because tomorrow they'll go back to being individuals in their ordinary clothes. But today, right now, they're all the same. All part of the larger pattern. The older people move more slowly, but with the same purpose. You see the woman who barely speaks to anyone, who keeps to herself through the ordinary months, stepping into the lane wearing the same red as everyone else. And the color transforms her. Not her personality, not her tendency towards solitude, but her relationship to the community. She's here. She's participating. The red she wears is a statement that doesn't require words. I belong to this place. This place belongs to me. On this day, we remember that together. You begin walking toward the center of town. There's no formal procession, no leader, no announced start time. But everyone is moving in the same direction, emerging from houses and lanes and gardens, all wearing red, all moving toward the square where the festival will unfold. The walking itself is part of it. The gradual accumulation of bodies, the way the crowd thickens as you approach the center, the recognition that you're not going alone but as part of a flow, a tide, and a movement that includes you without requiring you to organize it. Someone starts singing. You don't know who. The voice comes from somewhere behind you, slightly to the left. But it doesn't matter who started it because within moments, everyone is singing. The same song that's been sung on this day for longer than anyone can trace. The melody is simple enough that children can manage it, complex enough that the harmonies, when they emerge spontaneously from different parts of the crowd, make something beautiful and unrehearsed, something that could never be planned, but that happens anyway, every year, because the song is known and the voices are willing, and the red clothes everyone is wearing create a visual unity that the music mirrors. You're singing too, not performing, not worrying about whether your voice is good or whether you remember all the words. You're singing because everyone is singing, because the song is moving through the crowd like a living thing, and to not sing would be to separate yourself from the body you're part of. The larger organism that the festival creates out of individual people who, for this one day, become something more than individuals. The square is filling. Red everywhere you look. Red moving, red standing, red sitting on the low walls that border the fountain, where someone has already placed the first offerings of spring flowers. Early blooms that mirror the red of the clothes in shades of pink and deep crimson. A conversation between the human community and the natural world that's awakening around it. The flowers say, "We're here too. We're part of this." And the red clothes answer, "We see you. We welcome you." We mark this moment together. There's food, of course, tables laden with bread and cheese and the first greens of the season, dishes that families prepared together in the days leading up to the festival, recipes that require time and care, and ingredients saved for this specific purpose. But the food isn't just sustenance. It's another form of participation, another way of contributing to the collective experience. When you eat the bread someone else baked, you're taking their labor into your body. When someone eats what you brought, they're doing the same. The festival becomes a web of exchange, of mutual feeding, of debts that don't need to be repaid because they're not debts at all, but threads in the larger fabric of community life. Children are running between the adults now, are playing games that have their own history, their own rules passed down and slightly modified by each generation. You watch them chase each other in patterns that mirror dances the adults will perform later, rehearsing movements they'll understand differently when they're older, when the running becomes dancing, when the play becomes ritual, when they realize that the games they loved as children were always preparing them for the roles they'd inhabit as adults. The day has a rhythm, but it's not imposed from above. It emerges from the collective knowledge of how these things go, what happens when, who does what. There are people who know more, who hold more responsibility, who have been doing this longer, and whose presence steadies the festival, guides it without controlling it. But they're wearing the same red as everyone else. Their authority comes not from standing apart, but from standing within, from being so thoroughly part of the pattern that they can help others find their place in it. Music starts in one corner of the square, not the formal music that will come later, but someone with a drum, someone with a pipe, testing rhythms, warming up, and others joining in, creating soundscapes that drift across the crowd, inviting movement. inviting response. You see people beginning to dance, not in organized lines but in loose clusters, bodies moving in ways that are both individual and collective, improvisations within a structure everyone understands. You're not dancing yet, you're watching, which is also a form of participation. The festival doesn't require you to do everything. It only requires you to be present, to wear the color, to add your body to the count of bodies that makes this day what it is. Some people will dance for hours. Some will sit by the fountain and talk. Some will drift to the edges to check on children or rest their feet or simply stand and observe. All of it counts. All of it contributes. But there's a moment, always, when something shifts, when the individual activities coalesce into something unified. You feel it building now, the way the separate conversations and songs and dances are gradually aligning, are finding a common tempo, a shared focus. Someone climbs onto the platform in the center of the square. Not a stranger, but someone everyone knows. Someone who does this every year, whose voice carries the authority of repetition, of role, of being the person who speaks the words that need to be spoken. The crowd quiets. Not silence, but a kind of focused attention, a collective turning toward the center. The children are still moving, still whispering, but even they sense the change, the way the festival is gathering itself for the moment it's been building toward. The speaker doesn't talk about the weather or the crops or the specific concerns of this particular year. Instead, they tell a story. The same story that's been told on this day for generations, a story about the town's founding, about the people who first settled this valley, about the covenant they made with each other and with the land, about the promise to gather each spring in the same color, to remember together, to renew the bonds that make survival possible. The story isn't historically accurate, probably. It's been shaped by countless tellings, and embellished and simplified and adjusted to fit the needs of each generation. But its truth isn't in its facts. Its truth is in its function, in what it does to the people listening, the way it connects you to everyone who wore red before you, everyone who will wear red after you, everyone who stands in the square right now, listening to the same words, feeling the same pull towards something larger than individual life. When the story ends, there's a moment of stillness. Then the drums start. Not the casual, exploratory rhythms from earlier, but the formal beat, the pattern that everyone knows, that bodies remember, even if minds forget. And the dancing begins. Real dancing now, organized dancing. The whole square moving in patterns that take shape without anyone directing them. Formations that emerge from collective memory. And from muscle knowledge, from the understanding that when the drums play this rhythm, you move this way, and when they shift to that rhythm, you shift too. You're dancing. You didn't decide to dance. You simply found yourself moving, swept up in the current of bodies. Your feet knowing the steps even though you're not consciously thinking about them. You're holding hands with people on either side of you. One you know well, one you barely know. But in this moment, the distinction doesn't matter. You're all moving together, all wearing red, all part of the same organism that's forming and reforming in the square, a living mandala of bodies in motion. The dancing isn't frenzied. It's purposeful, deliberate, a meditation in movement. Each step matters. Each turn has meaning. The patterns you're creating have been created on this same ground for longer than anyone can count. And you're adding to that history, leaving no permanent mark, but contributing to the unbroken chain of red-clothed people moving in spring sunshine, remembering together what it means to belong. Time changes during the festival. Hours feel like minutes. Minutes stretch into eternities. You're sweating now, breathing hard, but you don't stop. No one stops. The momentum carries you, the collective energy, the knowledge that this only happens once a year, and when it's over, you'll go back to being separate. So while it lasts, you might as well give yourself to it completely. Might as well let the dance take you wherever it wants to go. Children dart through the moving lines, adding chaos to the order, and the adults make room for them. No adjusting the pattern to accommodate their wildness, understanding that the children's participation, however chaotic, is essential, is the promise that this will continue, that next year and the year after, there will still be people who know how to wear red and move together and remember what the festival remembers. The sun is high now. Someone has brought water. Someone else has brought fruit. The dancing pauses but doesn't stop completely. There's a shift to slower rhythms, to movements that allow for rest while maintaining connection. You're still holding hands with the people beside you, still moving, but gently now, a rocking more than a dance, a swaying that keeps the collective energy alive while acknowledging the body's limits. You catch your breath and look around. The square is a sea of red. So much red it stops being a color and becomes a statement, a declaration, a visible manifestation of something invisible. Unity, belonging, the ties that bind people to each other and to the place they share. The red doesn't erase differences. In the ordinary days ahead, you'll still disagree with your neighbors, still have conflicts and competitions, and all the friction that comes from living in close proximity. But for today, the red says, beneath the differences, there's this. There's us. There's the fact that we're here together, that we've chosen to remember together, that we're part of something that was here before us and will be here after us. And our individual lives, however important they feel, are small parts of a much larger pattern. The afternoon brings different activities. Some people drift away from the dancing to engage in contests, tests of skill or strength that have their own history, their own significance. Others gather around storytellers who are sharing tales of previous festivals, memories of years when the rain came, or didn't come, when someone was born or married or buried on this day, weaving individual stories into the larger tapestry of collective memory. You find yourself sitting by the fountain with a group of people, some you know well, some you've only nodded to in passing. But the red you're all wearing creates a kind of intimacy, a permission to speak more freely than you might otherwise, to share observations and jokes and quiet moments of simply sitting together, watching the festival continue around you. Someone mentions that old woman who died last winter. How she loved this festival, how she wore her red dress even when she was too weak to leave her house, how she'd sit by her window and watch people pass on their way to the square. And there's sadness in the mention, but also continuity. She was here in the red for so many years, and now she's not. And next year someone else will be missing, and eventually you'll be the one people mention, the one who's no longer here to wear red and dance and eat the bread and sing the songs. But the festival will continue. The pattern will hold. Other people will wear red and move through the square and feel what you're feeling now. This sense of being part of something that transcends individual lives. The thought should be frightening, maybe. The idea of your own erasure, your own replaceability. But instead, it's comforting. You're not required to be special. You're not required to leave a unique mark. You're only required to show up, to participate, to add your thread to the larger cloth. And in doing so, you become immortal in a way that has nothing to do with being remembered as an individual. You become part of the pattern itself, indistinguishable from all the others who wore red before you, but essential nonetheless. As the sun begins its descent, the festival shifts again. The energy that was bright and active during the day becomes softer, more contemplative. The music slows. The dancing becomes more like walking, rhythmic processions that circle the square, that wind through the streets, that allow the red-clothed community to reclaim the entire town, to mark every corner with their presence, to say, all of this is ours, all of this is sacred, all of this matters. You're walking now with the whole crowd, a river of red moving through streets that look different when filled with people wearing the same color, moving at the same pace, breathing together. The familiar becomes strange and sacred. The ordinary houses and shops and wells and corners become stations in a pilgrimage, places where the festival pauses, where someone sings a particular song or performs a particular gesture, where the community remembers something specific about this place, this stone, this tree. There's a field at the edge of town where the procession finally arrives as the sun touches the horizon. Someone has prepared a fire, and as the light fades, the flames become the new center, the new focus. The crowd arranges itself in concentric circles around the fire, everyone still wearing red. But the red is changing color in the firelight, becoming orange and pink and shadow, creating a visual echo of the flames themselves. The singing starts again. Different songs now, slower songs, songs about endings and beginnings, about the cycle of seasons, about death and renewal, about the promise that spring will always return, that the festival will happen again, that the red will be worn again, that the pattern will hold. You're singing with everyone else, and the sound is enormous. Hundreds of voices raised together, creating harmonies that no individual could plan, but that emerge from the collective, from the willingness to blend rather than stand out, from the understanding that this sound, this particular combination of voices on this particular evening, will never happen again, but that something like it will happen next year, and the year after, and the year after that. The fire burns down. The singing softens. People begin to drift away in small groups, families and friends walking back toward town together, still wearing red, but carrying the festival inside them now, carrying the memory of having moved together, having eaten together, having danced and sung and sat and walked as part of something larger than themselves. You walk back slowly. Your feet hurt. Your voice is hoarse. But there's a satisfaction that has nothing to do with personal achievement and everything to do with having participated, having shown up, having added yourself to the count. Tomorrow you'll wake up and put on different clothes and go about your individual life with all its specific concerns and challenges. But tonight, for these last few hours, you're still wrapped in red. I'm still part of the larger body, still connected to everyone who's wearing the same color and moving through the same darkness toward home. In your house, you carefully remove the red clothes and fold them, placing them somewhere safe where they'll wait for next year. The cloth is stained with sweat and of food and the dust of the square. You could wash it, but you won't. The stains are part of it now, part of the history of this year's festival, marks that will layer with the stains from years past and years to come. A physical record of participation, of presence, of having been part of the pattern. You lie down to sleep. Your body is exhausted but satisfied, held by a tiredness that's different from the everyday weariness of work. This is the tiredness of having given yourself completely to something, and of having moved beyond the boundaries of your individual self and touched something larger, something that will hold you even when you're too tired to hold yourself. The last thought before sleep takes you is simple. You'll do this again next year. And the certainty of that repetition, the knowledge that this pattern will hold, that the festival will return, that you'll once again wear red and move with everyone else through the ancient choreography of belonging, settles over you like a blanket, like a blessing, like the answer to a question you didn't know you were asking. But you're not in that town, are you? You're here now, in a time and place where no one wears the same color, unless it's an accident or a brand, where festivals are performances you attend rather than patterns you inhabit, where the very idea of moving in unison seems quaint or suspicious or impossible. The longing you feel isn't simple. It's complicated by knowledge, by awareness of what those festivals meant and didn't mean, by understanding that the unity they created was real, but also limited, that they happened within communities that were often rigid and sometimes cruel, that the belonging they offered came with costs you might not be willing to pay. Because here's what the red clothes didn't show: the hierarchy beneath the apparent equality. The fact that some people wore finer wool while others wore rough linen, even if the color was the same. The fact that women and men, children and adults, wealthy and poor, might all wear red, but didn't all dance the same dances, didn't all have the same access to the center of the festival. It didn't all go home to the same comfort or security or freedom. The festivals were real, the unity was real. But they existed within societies that were also deeply stratified, where your place in the world was mostly determined by the circumstances of your birth, where the freedom to leave or change or become something different was limited or absent entirely. The same communities that created these moments of collective joy also enforced rules you'd find intolerable, maintained hierarchies you'd reject, punished deviations you'd defend. So the nostalgia has to be complicated, has to acknowledge that what you're longing for isn't the past itself, but something the past contained, something that's been lost in the transition to the world you actually inhabit, that the world that gives you freedoms, those red-clothed people never had but withholds belonging in ways they never experienced. You can leave. This is the crucial difference. If your town or your family or your community becomes unbearable, you can go. You can get on a plane or a bus or simply walk away. You can reinvent yourself, choose a new name, build a new life. The world is open to you in ways it never was to them. But that openness comes with a cost. And the cost is the thing you're feeling right now, lying in the dark, wondering what it would be like to be held by something larger than yourself, to participate in a pattern that didn't require you to choose it every single day. They couldn't leave. For most of them, the town they were born in was the town they'd die in. And the people they wore red with were the people they'd know their entire lives. The festival wasn't optional. It was simply what happened, what everyone did, a pattern as inevitable as the seasons. And that lack of choice, that constraint, was also what made the belonging so complete. You were part of the community not because you chose to be, but because you were. The festival didn't require your consent. It claimed you. It included you. You belonged whether you felt like it or not. This is what modern life has traded away. The constraints that made people cruel or small or limited have been loosened, which is good, which is necessary, which you wouldn't actually want to undo. But in loosening those constraints, something else was lost. The automatic belonging, the unchosen inclusion, the pattern that held you even when you didn't want to be held. Now everything is a choice. Where you live, who you know, what you participate in, how you spend your time. And choice is freedom, but it's also burden. Every choice requires you to choose, to decide, to commit, to maintain. Nothing is automatic. Nothing simply includes you without your active participation. And the energy required to constantly choose, constantly construct, constantly maintain your place in the world is exhausting in ways that are hard to name. The festivals you have access to now are different. They're events you attend rather than patterns you inhabit. You buy a ticket, you travel to them, you participate for a defined period, and then you leave. And they can be powerful, can create moments of connection and transcendence and collective joy. But they're not inevitable. They're not woven into the fabric of your ordinary life. They're separate, special, something you do rather than something you are. The difference matters. When the festival is separate from ordinary life, it becomes a peak experience, something elevated and extraordinary. Which sounds good, but it also means the festival can't do what those old festivals did. Can't create the steady, reliable rhythm of belonging that punctuated the year, that reminded you monthly or seasonally or annually that you were part of something larger, that your life was held by patterns older than yourself. The old festivals were ordinary in a way that made them powerful. They weren't peak experiences. They were expected experiences, rhythms as natural as breathing, as necessary as eating. And you didn't have to get excited about them, or prepare mentally, or transform yourself to participate. You simply wore red when it was time to wear red, danced when it was time to dance, sang the songs you'd been singing since childhood, moved through the choreography your body knew by heart. And because they were ordinary, because they were inevitable, they could hold space for all of you. Your grief and your joy, your boredom and your excitement, your individual concerns, and your participation in the collective. The festival didn't require you to be happy or grateful or transformed. It only required you to show up, to wear the color, to move with everyone else. And in that simple, unchosen participation, something happened that's hard to access in the modern festivals that require so much intention, so much choice, to so much active construction of meaning. You're beginning to see the paradox. The loss isn't simple. What was lost when communities became optional, when festivals became events, when the pattern became a choice, was real. The automatic belonging, the unchosen inclusion, the rhythm that held you without asking permission, these were valuable. These met needs that your modern life struggles to address. But what was gained is also real, also valuable, also necessary. The freedom to leave, to choose, to construct your own life according to your own values and needs and desires. This is not something you'd actually trade away, even for the deepest belonging. So you're caught between two worlds, two sets of needs that don't fully align. You need freedom and you need belonging. You need choice and you need inevitability. And you need to be an individual and you need to be part of a pattern larger than yourself. And the world you live in has optimized for freedom and choice and individuality, which gives you things the red-clothed people never had, but withholds things they took for granted. This is why the nostalgia is survival instinct. Not because the past was better, but because the past contained something necessary that the present has misplaced. Your longing isn't foolish or regressive. It's your body and your soul recognizing that something's missing, that the optimization toward individual freedom has created deficits in collective belonging, that you're living in a moment of transition between two modes of being human, and you're experiencing the losses without fully experiencing the compensating gains. The question isn't whether to go back. Yet you can't go back. The world that made those festivals possible is gone, dissolved by forces too large and complex to reverse. The question is whether something like that belonging can be reconstructed, reimagined, created anew in a world that values choice and mobility and individual freedom. And the honest answer is, partially, maybe, incompletely. You can create intentional communities. You can participate in rituals that attempt to recreate the power of those old festivals. You can gather with people who share your values and create rhythms and patterns and moments of collective movement, but it won't be the same. Can't be the same. Because the crucial ingredient, the thing that made those old festivals powerful, was their unchosen nature, their inevitability, the fact that they claimed you rather than waiting for you to claim them. When participation is optional, when the festival requires your active choice, when you can leave at any time, something changes. Not everything. Connection is still possible. Collective joy is still real. But the depth of belonging, the sense of being held by something larger than yourself, something that will continue whether you participate or not, that's harder to access. Because, always that this gathering exists because people chose to make it exist. And if those people stop choosing, it will dissolve. The old festivals didn't depend on anyone's choice. They were simply there, year after year, held by tradition and expectation and the collective memory of everyone who participated. You could be angry or grieving or exhausted or ecstatic, and the festival would still happen. You could skip it, theoretically, but the social cost would be so high that skipping wasn't really an option. You were included whether you wanted to be or not. And that lack of choice, that inevitable inclusion, created a kind of belonging that choice can't quite replicate. So you're left with the longing and the knowledge that what you're longing for can't be fully recovered. The past is past. The world has changed, and the change has brought real goods, real freedoms, real expansions of what's possible for human lives. But it's also brought losses, and the losses are worth acknowledging, worth mourning, worth holding in your awareness, even as you move forward into a future that will have to find new ways to meet the old needs. Maybe the best you can do is understand what's happening. To recognize that the restlessness you feel isn't a personal failing, but a rational response to a genuine absence. That the nostalgia that surfaces when you imagine everyone wearing the same color is your body's way of saying, this mattered. This met needs that aren't being met now. This is worth remembering, even if it can't be recreated. And in understanding, maybe there's a kind of peace. Not the peace of resolution, but the peace of recognition. You're caught between worlds, living in a time when the old patterns have dissolved, but new patterns haven't fully formed. The belonging you crave isn't gone because you're broken, or because you're not trying hard enough. It's gone because the world changed, because the conditions that made it possible don't exist anymore, because you're living in the aftermath of a transformation that's given you much, but taken something too. The task, then, isn't to recreate the past. It's to carry the memory forward, to let it inform how you build and what you value, to remember that humans need both freedom and belonging, both choice and inevitability, both individual expression and collective rhythm, to hold the tension between these needs rather than trying to resolve it, to accept that you're living in a complicated moment that doesn't have simple answers. And in accepting this, in letting yourself feel the longing without demanding that it be resolved, something softens. The restlessness doesn't disappear, but it becomes more bearable, because you understand it now. You know what you're longing for, and why it can't be fully satisfied, and why the longing itself is valuable, is information, is your deepest self trying to tell you something about what it means to be human. You're still lying in the dark. The screen is off now, or maybe it's still glowing, but you're not looking at it anymore. You're breathing. You're feeling the weight of your body. You're letting the images of the red-clothed people fade, not because they don't matter, but because they've done their work, have given you what you needed, have reminded you of something essential about belonging and rhythm and the power of moving together. The people in that town are gone. The festivals they celebrated have ended. The red clothes have faded and dissolved, returned to the earth or burned, or simply worn away by time. But the pattern they enacted, the need they met, the knowledge they carried about what it means to belong to something larger than yourself, these haven't disappeared. They're still here, in your longing, in your restlessness, in the ache you feel when you imagine what it would be like to wear the same color as everyone around you and move together through a ritual as old as memory. You carry them, not as nostalgia, not as a desire to return, but as information about what humans need, what communities can provide, what's lost and gained in the ongoing transformation of how we live together. You carry them, and in carrying them, you honor them. You keep them alive in a different form. You ensure that the knowledge they held doesn't completely disappear, but instead informs whatever comes next. The world you live in is still figuring out how to meet the needs that those old festivals met automatically. How to create belonging in a context of choice. How to generate collective rhythm in a culture that values individual freedom. How to hold people in patterns larger than themselves without constraining the mobility and autonomy that define modern life. These are hard problems, maybe impossible problems, but they're worth working on, worth thinking about, worth carrying into whatever comes next. And maybe that's enough. Not a solution, but an acknowledgement. Not a return, but a remembering. Not a recreation of what was, but an honouring of what it gave, what it meant, what it teaches about the perennial human need to sometimes stop being an individual and become instead a thread in something larger, a voice in a collective song, a body moving in unison with other bodies through a pattern that was there before you arrived and will be there after you leave. Let yourself rest now. Let the images fade. Let the red dissolve back into the darkness from which it emerged. You've travelled far tonight, backward through time to a place that doesn't exist anymore, to watch people engage in rituals you've never performed, to feel the pull of belonging you've never fully experienced. And the journey has given you something. Not an answer, but a kind of understanding, not a solution, but a recognition of what's missing and why it matters and why the missing itself is information. Your breathing is slower now, deeper. The muscles that were tight are releasing. The mind that was churning is settling. You're not in that town square, wearing red. They're moving with hundreds of others through ancient patterns. You're here, in your own life, in your own time, navigating the particular challenges and freedoms of the modern world. But you've touched something tonight. You've remembered something. You've let yourself feel the longing for belonging without trying to fix it or explain it away. And in that feeling, in that willingness to long for something you can't have, there's a kind of wisdom, because the longing itself is the connection. The memory of what was, even if you never lived it, is the thread that ties you to everyone who came before, everyone who wore the same color and danced the same dances and knew in their bones what it meant to be held by something larger than themselves. You don't have to do anything with this. Like you don't have to create a new festival or join a community or change your life in dramatic ways. You just have to know, have to remember, have to let the knowledge settle into your body, where it can inform how you move through the world, how you value connection, how you recognize those rare moments when the boundary between you and others dissolves, when you're moving together, breathing together, part of something that feels, for just a moment, like coming home. The darkness is complete now. Not the darkness of absence, but the darkness of rest, of dissolution, of letting go. You're not fighting anymore, not searching, not trying to solve the unsolvable problem of living in a world that gives you freedom but withholds belonging, that celebrates individuality but makes it hard to be held. You're just breathing, just being, and just letting yourself be carried by the rhythm of your own breath, which is, in its own way, a pattern larger than yourself, a choreography you've been performing since birth, a dance you'll continue until you stop. And for now, this breath, this moment, this letting go of the need to understand or fix or change anything, this is enough. The red-clothed people would understand. They knew about rest, knew about the moment after the festival, when you take off the color and fold it away and let your body recover from the exertion of moving together. They knew about the satisfaction of having participated, having shown up, having added yourself to the pattern. And they knew about the quiet that comes after, the stillness that follows the movement, the peace of having given yourself completely to something and then releasing it, letting it fade, trusting that it will return when the time is right. You're in that moment now. The festival of imagination is ending. The vision of the town square filled with red-clothed people is dissolving. You're coming back to yourself, to your own life, to the ordinary world that will greet you when you wake. But you're bringing something back with you. Not the festival itself, but the memory of what it felt like to imagine it, to let yourself long for it, to recognize in the longing something essential about who you are and what you need. This is the gift of nostalgia when it's understood correctly. Not a desire to return, but a memory of what mattered, what met needs, what gave life a shape and a rhythm and a sense of being held. The memory doesn't demand that you recreate the past. It only asks that you remember, one that you honor, that you carry forward the knowledge that humans need more than freedom and choice, that they need belonging and rhythm and moments when the self dissolves into something larger. And in carrying that knowledge, you change how you move through the world. Not dramatically, not obviously, but in small ways, in daily choices, in how you respond when you see people gathering, when you hear music that invites collective movement, when you recognize those rare moments when the possibility of belonging presents itself, however temporarily, however partially. You don't have to wear red. You don't have to dance in a town square. You don't have to participate in rituals handed down through generations. But you can recognize the impulse, the need, the deep human hunger for collective rhythm and shared belonging. And in recognizing it, you can honor it, can make small choices that move toward it, can create, in your own limited way, moments when you stop being quite so individual and become instead part of something larger. This is all that's asked of you. Not perfection, not a complete solution, just awareness, just recognition, just the willingness to feel the longing and let it inform how you live, how you connect, how you respond to the rare opportunities for collective movement that your modern life offers. The breath is all that remains now, in and out, rising and falling. The most basic rhythm, the most fundamental pattern. You don't choose it. It happens. It includes you without asking. And in this moment, as you let yourself be carried by it, you're participating in something larger than yourself, something that connects you to everyone who breathes, everyone who's ever breathed, everyone who will breathe in the future. It's not the same as wearing red. It's not the same as dancing in the square, but it's something. It's the thread that connects you to the pattern, the rhythm that holds you even when nothing else does. The promise that you're part of something larger than your individual life, something that continues whether you notice it or not. Let yourself sink into it. Let the breath carry you. Let the images of red-clothed people fade completely, become memory, become dream, become something you once thought about but don't need to think about anymore, because the lesson has been learned. The recognition has happened. The connection has been made. You're part of the pattern. You always have been. Not the specific pattern of the festival, not the particular ritual of wearing red and dancing in the square, but the larger pattern of being human, of longing for belonging, of carrying memories of what mattered even when you never lived it yourself, of being connected to everyone who came before and everyone who will come after through the simple fact of being alive, being here, being part of the ongoing story of humans trying to figure out how to live together. This is enough. This recognition, this awareness, this letting go of the need for more while honoring the longing that will never fully be satisfied. This breathing, this darkness, this slow dissolution of the self into sleep, into rest, into the pattern that holds everyone, that requires nothing but presence, that gives the gift of belonging simply because you exist. The festival has ended. The red has faded. The people have gone home. But the pattern remains in your breath, in your body, in the knowledge that you carry, even in your sleep, about what it means to belong to something larger than yourself. Rest now. The pattern will hold you. It always has. It always will. You don't have to do anything but let go. Let yourself be carried. Let the breath rise and fall. Let the darkness be complete. Let the longing dissolve into something softer, something kinder, something that doesn't demand resolution, but only recognition. You are held. You are part of something. You belong. Not because you chose it, but because you are. The same way those red-clothed people belonged. The same way everyone belongs. The same way the belonging continues even when the specific forms change. Even when the festivals end. Even when the world transforms into something unrecognizable. You belong, here, now, in this breath, in this darkness, in this slow fade into sleep. You belong, and that's all you need to know. That's all you need to carry. That's the knowledge that will hold you through the night and into whatever comes next. Breathe, rest, belong. The pattern holds. It always has. It always will. And you, lying here in the dark, breathing slowly, feeling the weight of your body, letting the images fade, letting the longing soften, letting yourself be held by something you can't name but can feel. You are part of it, part of the pattern, part of the ongoing story, part of the same human family that once wore red and danced together and knew in their bones what you're just beginning to remember. You belong. Rest now. The pattern holds.